Hello and welcome to Candid Conversations. Today we have the pleasure of speaking with Melanie Gareau. She's a teacher who lost one of her students to suicide, and it shattered her heart. That's when she turned to writing as a therapeutic outlet. And throughout her journey, she was inspired by the resilience and courage of her students, who not only were dealing with the loss of a friend and peer, but also dealing with everything else a teenager contends with on a daily basis. Why Me, Why Not was born out of Melanie's desire for every teen to know their worth, strength, and brilliance. Now, due to the sensitive nature of this episode, I just want to warn you that there is some conversation about suicide. Thank you for joining us. Thank you very much for being here with us, Melanie. Can you tell us a little bit about how you became involved with the topic of teenagers? And can you share your personal motivation and journey that led you to focus on this area of expertise?
Okay. Yes, I would love to talk about that. Thank you so much for inviting me. This is very exciting to be able to share my story and to share my hopefully advice that people can use at this time with if they're raising teenagers. So I have been working with teenagers since I was about 22. I'm a teacher. I was a teacher for a little over a dozen years, and then I became the school principal for a few years. And now this year I am working as an educational consultant. So I'm not actually in the classroom this year, but I did spend a lot of time with teenagers. I've always really loved working with teenagers. I find they are so interesting. I love learning about them. I love learning about how they grow and how they learn. And I love everything about teenagers. I think they're so interesting.
Yes.
And the reason why I'm continuing to work with teenagers, even if I'm not in the classroom, it is because of a tragic event that happened in my school in 2015. So at that time, I was a classroom teacher. I was teaching mostly high school students. I'm in a very small school, very, very small school. And I did have some elementary age students, but most of them were in either 10th, 11th, or 12th grade. And one morning I got to work early. I always tried to show up about an hour before the students. And I was prepping my class, and I noticed that one of my male students had pulled up to the school in his car, which I found kind of strange because it was fairly early and he wasn't one to come to school before class started. But his mom worked in the school, so I thought maybe he was coming to help her with something. She was the custodian at that time. And so I went back to work. I had my back to the window and to my student. And a couple minutes later, I heard a sound. And the sound to me, it was the sound a snowball would make if someone had thrown it into the window. That is the exact sound I heard. Wow. So I was convinced someone had thrown a snowball at my window. Until about a minute later, someone ran into my classroom and said that my student had taken his life outside of the school. Yeah. So that was in 2015. The rest of that day, the rest of that school year was a very bizarre time. I don't really know how to describe it. Everything seemed to go in slow motion, but also very fast at the same time. Everything that happened the rest of that day, we had students get dropped off. Like the buses showed up not too long afterwards. We're in a very small town, and we are far from, our first responders, the RCMP and whatnot. And by the time the cops showed up, we had students in the school, all of the students, and we were, as the adults in the school, kind of forced to be very strong for our students and get through the rest of that day, get through the rest of that week, and get through the rest of that school year. It was incredibly tough. what happened to me, I only really realized later on. I didn't think about what had happened too much. I refused to think about it because I didn't want to go there. I didn't want to relive some of the emotions of that day. So I kind of went inward. I don't know if that makes sense, but
Yes.
I didn't allow myself to think about it. I was in pilot mode or autopilot mode. I became very hyper aware of how my other students were feeling.
Mm-hmm.
I was hyper aware of what they were telling me and what they weren't telling me, what their body language was telling me, because I was determined not to lose another student to suicide. And in a small community like my own, these are students, from the time they walk into that school as a preschool student.
Yes.
And you kind of follow them right through to 12th grade because of how small it is, and their families. And so that was very, very tough. So fast forward to 2018, our community was struck by another young suicide. This was a former student of mine. He had been out of the, he was an adult at the time, but not, he wasn't very old. And he took his life, and he was my best friend's brother. And that time I felt like everything kind of came back. All those emotions I had ignored, all those thoughts I had ignored, all the stuff I wasn't ready to work on, they all kind of came back with a vengeance.
I'm sure.
And I was kind of forced to take a look at the situation and allow myself to heal. But I didn't do therapy, which would have been the smart thing to do at the time. That came later. I decided my way of dealing with the situation, dealing with the emotions, was to journal. So I made myself journal every morning before work. I would wake up early. I wouldn't journal about the suicides, but I would journal anything that I needed to journal to feel grounded. That's what all the experts said. They said, if writing is very healing, it's a healing practice. And it was for me. It felt amazing. And a few months later, after having mastered this morning practice, I decided to turn it into a different kind of writing, never with the intention of publishing a book. I would journal in my notebook, in ink, and then I would grab my laptop and I would jot some thoughts down in a Google Docs document. And after a year of doing that, I had what was about the length of a young adult nonfiction book. And I really tried to convince myself that publishing was not what I was meant to do with it. But I kept getting this thought that what I had written it could be helpful to someone who is struggling, to a young adult or teenager who is struggling. And I couldn't ignore that thought. It kept getting louder and louder and more persistent. So I decided to publish the book, and it took a long time. My decision to publish was made in early 2019, but my book only hit the shelves in 2023, just a few short months ago. So it took me a while to get it up and, on the available for people to read, but it was a journey. It was meant to be like that. I don't know if I was in a good enough place to publish it at the time. I started a new job. I wouldn't have had enough mental space to dedicate to my book. So the way it happened was how it was meant to be. And the book is not a book specifically on mental health or on suicide or on depression. But it is a book for young readers who are going through a hard time. I've chosen 14 common challenges that teenagers go through, and I talk about them, and I tell stories about those challenges. And my book is not It is not a step-by-step guide. I didn't want it to read like a guide. I wanted it to read like a conversation, because I think teens don't always have someone they can talk to about hard things. And I wanted them to feel like they weren't alone as they were reading the stories in the book. And yeah, so that came out in August, and I'm very proud of it. But it is the first step of many more steps, hopefully, to help teens through their those tough years.
Yes. Well, congratulations on your book release. And let's just,
Thank you.
the title of the book is Why Me, What Now?
Yes.
Where can followers find that book?
It is available on Amazon worldwide. I think that's the way people like to buy it the most. In the United States, you can get it on the Barnes and Noble website.
Okay.
In Canada, you can get it on the Indigo website. It's also available on my personal website for people who really like to get a signed copy, because the copies ordered through my website come from me. So yeah, there are multiple ways to get it, and it's available as an ebook and as a paperback. And yeah, thanks for asking.
Thank you. And thank you for sharing your personal story with us. I'm sure it's probably brought up lots of emotions for you.
Yes, it gets easier to talk about. I do strongly believe that talking about it is so important, not just for myself, but something so delicate like suicide and mental health and depression issues. I think we need to talk about it so that it's not as scary of a topic when it does come up. So I love that I get the opportunity to talk about it.
Fantastic. And we love that you are here sharing it with us. Can you offer some insight on the unique developmental and psychological changes that teenagers go through, and how having this knowledge can help parents and also nannies who work with teenagers support them during this critical stage?
Yeah, for sure. I'll do my best to explain how I kind of see it from my perspective. I didn't study this. These are comments made by, observation. I mean, I've done some research just by curiosity when I had a student who was going through something, and I wanted to know more about that thing. So I just want to mention that I am not, besides working in the educational field, I don't have other credentials that make me an expert on this topic. But I do know that puberty can be very hard on teenagers. They are growing at such a fast pace, and it's there are lots of things going on in their body, and they don't really understand it while they're going through it. It is also a time of their lives where they are kind of developing their identity and the identity that they feels good to them. They are discovering who they are. So for a long time, when they're younger, when they really, really need mom and dad, or, they need that caregiver to help them with things, yes, they are developing their identity then too. But as a teenager, you're kind of, it's that in-between phase between really needing someone to help you and then becoming an adult and not needing anyone to help you. I feel like we always need people's help, but in a different way.
Yes, and different levels as well.
Right, exactly. So it's kind of that in-between stage, and there's a lot going on because teenagers, because they're such social beings, they have pressure from all around them. They have pressure coming from their peers, pressure coming from their parents, pressure coming from their teachers. They are trying to find where they fit. They want to fit in. They want to belong somewhere. They're seeking validation and acceptance from the people around them. And it's very important for them to feel like they are accepted. But because they're with other teenagers who are also trying to figure out their own stuff, those other teenagers are not necessarily saying, hey, come with us and feel accepted like we accept you. And so it's kind of it is a hard time in their lives. They're trying to gain independence. They still need guidance, but they they would rather not need guidance because they really want to be able to control certain things. So the second part of your question was, what can we do as their caregivers to help them? Right? It was
Yes. Yeah.
yeah,
How do we support them?
right. So I've met a lot of parents, and I haven't met a parent who doesn't care about their child. And I know you work with nannies, and I imagine it's the same. We care about the people, the
Yes.
kids we care for. And our decisions, while they might not always be the best decision, they are what we think is the best decision at the time. And I would hate, so I will preface before I continue, because I I want to make sure your listeners
Mhm.
don't feel like what advice I give or what thoughts I have are an indication that they're doing something wrong, because
Okay.
I know that they're doing, it's just the fact that your listeners would listen to a podcast like this shows a lot about how much they care. And I hope that as they listen, they're going to take what they want and leave what they don't want, because parenting is very personal. We have our own upbringing that we refer to. We have our own hopes and expectations for our kids that we refer to. We
Mhm.
have our own traumas. We have that deep need to protect them and make sure they are walking on the right path. That's kind of I'm a mother. That's kind of an instinct. I want them to be okay.
Mhm.
And my first piece of advice, I feel like this is the most important, is to navigate this time, this period in your kid's life with empathy and understanding, not only for the teen, but also for yourself as the caregiver, because we make mistakes. Our kids make mistakes. We will continue to make mistakes and hopefully learn from them. And we have to be okay with making mistakes. And as the caregiver, if you are open and honest and okay with the mistakes that you make, you are also allowing your teen and your child to be open and honest and okay with the mistakes they're making. So I think we have to, this is hard to say, and I don't want to insult anyone, but I think we need to take ourselves a little less seriously, because we will make mistakes. There is no guidebook for parenting. We're all trying our best. And I know that parents, the ones I've met, all of the ones I've met, they all made decisions they thought were the best ones. Our teenagers are in that phase, like I said before, where they are gaining independence, trying to gain independence and autonomy. And sometimes it's a battle. We're kind of fighting with them, because that's control that we had, from the time they're born until they're, starting to be a little bit more independent. We had that control, and now we have to give some of it away.
Mhm.
And that's a hard thing for parents. It's a learning thing for parents too. And I think sometimes we have to swallow our own fear and kind of, choose our battles, which would be my second piece of advice. We tend to sometimes make decisions. We become very overprotective of our kids, and we want to have boundaries to keep them safe, and that's great. And they need boundaries for sure to feel safe and secure. But my second piece of advice would be that in some instances, it might be healthier and wiser to give away some of the control. So I'll give an example.
Mhm.
If your 13-year-old decides that she is too cool to wear a winter coat, and it is the middle of winter and it's very cold. This is something I'm dealing with. I thought of this example. It was not very hard to think about, because I'm literally dealing with this every morning. I have two kids who are teenagers, and they both refuse to wear their winter coat to school. Okay. So I don't want to say that this is how everyone should deal with it, because every situation is different and every kid is different and every parent has different different limits, different boundaries, and that's okay. But my first instinct in that situation is to say, you must wear your coat and you must wear your toque and you have to wear your mittens because it is way too cold outside. Do not argue with me, just do it. That's what I would like to be able to say. I know that if I said that, and I have tried, my kids will fight back. They will fight back and say, I don't want to wear my coat. And they are probably putting their coat on to walk out the door and then taking it off immediately afterwards. So I'm thinking because in my own personal situation, my kids, when they decide not to wear a coat, they're getting on a bus for 3 minutes because I live very close to the school, and they're getting off the bus and they go into the school, and they don't have outdoor recess at their age. So there is no real big danger in having my kids walk out of the house without their coat. If I tell them they can make the decision they want, and I will remind them that they have a warm winter coat, if I stop there, there is more of a chance, there's a better chance that my kids will decide to pick up their coat one day because they will get cold, right? Yes. This is a battle that I probably shouldn't fight with them because it's not really worth it. And in that moment when they are allowed to walk out of the house and in the dreadful cold without their coat, and that's a decision they made, they probably feel like, they feel okay because they got to control that part of their life. You know what I mean? Yeah. It's the same with other small decisions. Your kids will ask if they can color their hair or cut their hair, and you kind of go, oh, like, I don't know if I want that, or they want this specific pair of short shorts to wear on the beach or in the gym when they play sports, and your first instinct might be like, oh, I don't know, what will people think, like those shorts are so short. But is it a danger? Is it, what is the real reason behind why you're making those decisions? So I think parents need to, especially at this age, when they're teenagers and they're trying to gain all this control and get as much control as they can, we really have to pick our battles. Yeah, teens need control. And if we have to be careful, because if we don't give them any control, they will find things to control. Those things might be dangerous things that they're going to decide that they need to control. They might be done behind our back because they know we wouldn't agree, so they'll do it behind our back. Another thing I would like to tell parents is that communication is so important, and the way we communicate with our teens is important too. So I'll give another example. Your teenager, probably an older teenager, decides that they want to go to a party. And this is where I am in my parenting journey. So I say this lightly because I am going through it too. I am going through it like other parents are going through it right now. My daughter wants to go to parties, and I want to be okay with her going to parties. So the first thing I want to tell her is, okay, you can go, but I want you to be back at this time, and I want to know who's going to be there and what you're going to be doing, and you can't do any of these things because they're dangerous, and you better be back at a reasonable time because we're going to grandma's in the morning, and like all these rules and all these, all these strict rules. That's what I would love to be able to say. But it's kind of an aggressive response. Like my teenager is starting to do things on her own, and I need to trust her as hard as that is. A better way to navigate something like that would be to negotiate and compromise with your teen and give them a voice in the decision. So it might sound a little bit like, I am okay with you attending this party, but would you be open to talking about a few things beforehand? It would make me feel a lot better. So by inviting your teenager to have a conversation in that way, not, well, you better sit down because we need to talk.
Mm-hmm.
But it's saying, would you mind having a conversation about this? It would make me feel a lot better. I think most teens would be they would be okay with that because they know that, you know, they got a yes out of you already, so they'll listen. And then obviously we have to have boundaries because they're still young and their prefrontal cortex is not fully developed, and they can make bad decisions, and they need to be aware of some of the dangers. That is important. But it is a conversation. It should be a conversation more than I'm telling you all this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I think that's very important. Something like curfew. You know, if you asked your teen instead, you know, what would be a reasonable time for you to be back? You know, considering the fact that tomorrow we're going to go see grandma for brunch, it'll be early. What do you think would be a reasonable curfew for you? I would hope that most teenagers would come up with a reasonable time, a reasonable suggestion, or at least be able to negotiate and
Yes.
compromise on that. I think we need to treat teenagers with respect. The way we talk, the way we treat them is how they will grow up communicating with other people.
Mm-hmm.
Fighting with them does not help. And I say that, and I am, it is something that I'm trying to practice too. I'm definitely not perfect when it comes to that, because we know how teenagers can be. Their mood is not always perfectly regulated, and emotions kind of get high, and it can be harder said than done. But I think we need to be mindful of how we are treating them, because they are human beings and they need to be treated with respect. And their response, if we treat them respectfully, will be a lot better than if we are barking orders at them all the time. So I actually did see something today. I think it was in my Instagram, and I found it very interesting, but I didn't have time to click on it and dig deeper. But it had said that kids want to be close to their parents. Kids want to be okay with their parents. It might not feel like it all the time, but they actually want a good relationship with their parent.
Yeah.
So I think we need to think about that too. They don't want to hate us, and they don't, you know, when they talk to us in a way that's not ideal, it doesn't make us feel good. I mean, they've got a lot of stuff going on, and they're also trying their best with what, you know, everything that's going on in their lives. So
Yes. Do you think that if you, I mean, you talked about respect. So do you think that if you set up the way you raise your children from birth in a certain way, it helps with how the teenage years go by? So for example, if you treat your children, you know, with open communication, respect, and teaching them to be independent, allowing them to make certain decisions even when they're young. So are they going to use a spoon, or are they going to use a teaspoon to have their breakfast or whatever? Do you think that's a good foundation for the teenage years, or do you think it doesn't make a difference?
I think it makes all the difference. I think even a small toddler would like to be given choices.
Yes.
And it is something that, working in a school, we talked about that a lot, because the kid who is maybe acting up in class might want just a little bit of control over something.
Yes.
And by giving him or her two choices, you know, like, would you prefer this or this? They gain a little bit of that control, and it feels good. I also think that if you start young, if you treat your kids with respect when they're young, when they're toddlers, like the whole time, if you set boundaries that are clear, and you know, that you're, like, I think boundaries are important at all ages. I think when they're teenagers, we obviously have to lift some of those those boundaries, but kids feel safe when they know what they're allowed to do and what what they're not allowed to do at every age. And I think if you start when they're young, you're not having to develop new habits when they're teenagers. A little bit like not just for boundaries, but let's say you decide to have a rule about screen time in your house. It is a lot easier to give more screen time than it is to take it away after there's a habit that has been created. So a parent who has a young toddler and this might happen because parents also go through different seasons. Parents and caregivers go through different seasons too. Like we go through hard seasons and easier seasons. And if there's a season, a couple years in your life where things are so chaotic that your kid is allowed to be on screens as much as they want, that's harder to change. It happens, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's harder to take away a privilege than it is to kind of right, exactly. So I think if you could start young with certain things, it definitely makes it a lot easier.
Okay, so on the topic of screen time,
yes,
how would you approach, or what strategies would you use for, let's say, a teenager who just wants to sit in front of their phone? We know all teenagers want to scroll through TikTok, Instagram, and all of their different apps. But how would you approach this topic with a teenager?
Yeah, screen time. I can speak to the way that we've done it in our household. There are obviously different ways to go about this, and I don't want to make it sound like there's a good way and a bad way. It was always very important for my husband and me to have screen-free time during the day. And like, it depends on the day. If it is a school day, my kids know that there is a small window where they can have screens, and that, we allow ourselves to change that here and there depending on what's going on. But our dinner table, there are no screens allowed at the dinner table, and there are no screens allowed before they go to bed. And I've also, so my kids are getting to the age where playing is less common. I mean, they still play, it's different kind of play, but when we take screens away, they might put on quite the show about how boring it is to, oh my gosh, like, what am I going to do? I don't have my phone. And I'm very lucky in the sense that my husband and me both like, we like playing games and whatever. So we'll try to, get them playing a game, but that's not always something we want to do because we are two working parents, and that doesn't always work. But I think it's okay for kids to be bored. So I try not to let it bother me if they are making a scene. Not that they usually do, because it's always kind of been the rule in our house. And I think from what I've observed, being a mom of 3 young kids, they don't mind talking to their parents. It might be a little hard at first, but taking the screen away and then having a conversation about things that are interesting for them, and just a conversation. I try not to treat those moments like teaching moments or like lessons, oh, we're going to talk about this because I want you to learn this and this and this. And I try to just have a very judgment-free conversation with them. If they're telling me about something that happened at school, sometimes it makes me cringe, oh my gosh, I can't believe you did that, or I can't believe you said that. But it's okay. Thanks for telling me. And, tell me more, like what? And kids, like, they want to sit and have conversations with their parents. And I think if you're going to take away the screen time, maybe try at first to give them something else to do, whether it's have a conversation or play a game or something like that. And they'll fight it probably depending on their age, because it's not cool it's not cool to hang out with your mom and dad or your caregiver, but deep down, I think they don't mind. And if you're sitting in the same room and you're not even talking, not looking at each other, that's okay too. They're allowed to be bored.
Yes.
So that was a very long answer.
No, that's
Sorry.
okay. I think it's important to be bored at any age. I think
Yes.
young children, teenagers, adults even, because it gives
Yes.
your brain time to actually think about different things.
Absolutely. And you discover a lot about yourself when
Mhm.
you have those moments of quiet
Yes.
and boredom. You that's when your kind of your inner wisdom starts to talk, and you can hear it, because that's a big thing. I love anything to do with meditation and stuff like that. So taking all distractions away and being quiet is a very powerful thing for anybody.
And do you have any recommendations of resources or books or videos that parents and nannies can explore to better understand strategies for managing and nurturing the growth and well-being of teenagers?
Yeah, I only have one.
Mhm.
I read a book a while ago. It was called Untangled. I don't know if you've read it.
Yes.
Oh, you have?
I read it a while ago, so I don't
Okay.
remember it very well, but I have read it.
Okay. I enjoyed it, and the author is Lisa D'Amour.
Mhm.
I enjoyed it because it kind of it made me feel as a parent that some of the stuff my kids were going through, and not just my kids, but some of my students, some of the stuff they were going through, and some of the behaviors they were, some of their really sometimes strange and different and weird and new behaviors, they were normal. She made them seem normal.
Right.
And I enjoyed that. I really enjoyed her book. I think that's my biggest recommendation. I don't know if I've read some of Jodi Carrington, all of Jodi Carrington's books. I don't know if you're familiar with her.
No.
She wrote Kids These Days and Teachers These Days. And she's got another one. Her newest one is called, oh, I don't even know. I'm looking at my bookshelf right now. But she's got a third one. And I can't see it. I can't read that far. Anyway, all of her books were really great, but they were, as a teacher, I enjoyed them.
Mhm.
So that maybe I can't remember if I read it and put myself in my, my parent shoes, my parent hat, or if I read it as a teacher, you know what I mean? So they were also very good.
Fantastic. And if our viewers and listeners want to reach out to you, maybe to buy your book or to just, contact you,
Yes.
how can they do that? I will put this information in the description, but how can they reach out to you?
So I can give you my social media handle. It's the same for Facebook and Instagram. It's melg.author.
Mhm.
And I do have a website. It is my full name, melaniegareau.ca. And on my website, I do have my email address, and I am open to receiving emails if anyone has questions or comments. Or I also challenge parents to, and any caregiver, and I know you work with nannies, to challenge some of the stuff that I say. And I say it in my book too. I really hope that a teenager picking up my book challenges the parts that don't feel good to them. Because we are different beings and we are having a different life experience, and some things might resonate and some things might not, and that is okay. And I encourage my readers. Lots of my readers have been the parents of teenagers, actually, more than teenagers, which is not the way it was meant to be. But I think it's good for parents and caregivers to read the book and kind of have the same language that their kid might have around those issues, if their child decides to read it too. So I do encourage people to challenge it, and we can have a conversation about it, because parenting is, like I said at the beginning, it is such a personal thing. It's a personal experience. Every child is different, every parent is different, and when it goes wrong, when it's when it goes wrong, when you are too far away from what feels good to you, when you are getting, pressured into parenting in a way that doesn't feel right,
Yeah.
then then you're not doing it as effectively. You kind of have to be convinced that what you're doing is the right thing, and it's okay to go find information and to make mistakes and learn from them and change some of your ways. That is totally fine, but you have to find what feels good for you and your family. And yeah, that's all I want to say about that.
I think you're very right on that. I think there's so many books that talk about different kinds and styles of parenting, and it's not one size fits all.
Yeah.
Everybody has their style. Everybody has their needs that need to be met. Everybody has their issues that need to be dealt with. So just because you've read 10 books on the same topic doesn't mean that that's going to work for your child.
Yeah.
And that's why
Yes, absolutely.
so I get what you're saying. There is no right or wrong way of doing it. There's just the best way for you and your family and the children that you take care of.
Right, absolutely. Yeah, and they are their own being. A lot of parents will, how do I say this? Because I don't mean it as like an insulting thing, but they see their kids as an extension of themselves, and if their kid does something wrong, it reflects on them. And that's not the way it is. Our kids are their own beings. And yes, when they do something really well, we are so proud of them, but that's them. They are their own person.
Yes.
When they make a bad decision, it doesn't change who they are. That's another thing that I had planned on talking about, was how to address discipline. And I think it's because I did spend a few years as principal in my school, so I did have to have conversations with students who had made the wrong decision at that time, that specific day. And I really tried to focus on what would have been a better decision at that time, and having them see their actions as a mistake they made. They made the mistake and now it's done. We're not going to talk about it. We're trying to learn from this mistake, and we don't have to drag this on. The consequence, sometimes we don't need a consequence, because we are human and we make mistakes. And,
Yes.
if your kid does something, they just they made a bad judgment on something. Sometimes we don't need to ground them, or we don't need to take something away from them as a punishment. Because if we do that too often, we're also making that punishment a little less effective, because if we're throwing out punishments all the time as a way to discipline them, we have to just be very mindful of how we're using these mistakes as lessons, and how we can guide them through that mistake and not make them feel like they are a bad person, but that they just simply made a bad choice in that time. So yeah.
Lovely to meet with you and
Yes.
to this story that you shared with me, and thank you for doing that, because it's very powerful.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.